An elite DC girls' school thought its founding nuns taught slaves to read. Instead, the cash-strapped nuns were desperate to sell their slaves. It was the 1820s, and debt was piling up for Mother Agnes Brent, superior of the Georgetown Visitation Convent in Washington. The convent had still, Brent wanted to know, did the mother have to come along with the children? And if she did, if they are so young that they cannot be separated from the mother and the mother be given also, then we would have to request you to get a place for them, free of expense, Brent wrote in a letter. Missives like these, documented in a report compiled by a school archivist and historian, have shattered the long-cherished image of the three nuns who founded Georgetown Visitation Preparatory School in 1799. The research has it was common knowledge that the founding nuns owned slaves, but school lore has held that the sisters allowed enslaved children to attend Saturday school and defied the law by teaching them how to read. The 65, it's hard history to read, and that's the reality of it, said Caroline Handorf, the Director of Communications for Georgetown Visitation. But you can't move, Handorf said. The report, inspired in part by at Georgetown University to come to terms with its slaveholding past, has prompted really powerful and difficult conversations on campus. The school held slaves built a lot of DCU all over the U.S., but DC especially, she said. We were glad. Susan Malezity, a Georgetown University historian who serves as school archivist, said she found no evidence that the sisters at Visitation had ever held school for their slaves or taught them to read. Malezity, whose previous histories of the school did not include the exact number of enslaved people the sisters owned or the fact that the nuns made a profit by selling human beings. Georgetown Visitation subsidized its mission by the forced labor and the sale of enslaved people, the report concludes. Athos news of the research and its findings was published Friday by New York University professor Rachel Swarnzin. The Catholic stand, Joseph Manett, an Indiana University of Pennsylvania professor who, said many historians of Catholicism would be unsurprised by slaveholding nuns. The number of enslaved people at Georgetown Visitation varied from year to year, dipping as low as 3 in 1840 and as high as 17 a decade later. Between 1890, the nuns maneuvered fiercely to receive full payment for every enslaved person they sold. At one point, another time, a Visitation sister complained that the 10% commission fee for a Maryland slave seller they had hired was by far too much. The seller responded, "The public is just now learning about nun slaveholding practices because of a recently heightened national focus on race," Manett said. Anthony Bogues, a professor at Brown University who studies the history and consequences of slavery, said American society is caught between countervailing forces: an increase in overt racism, including recent racist tweets from President Trump, on the one side, and greater efforts to come to terms with the nation's history of racism and legacy of slavery on the other. "I think we are at a moment that's really contradictory," Bogues said. First, the Georgetown Visitation wanted to join what many see as a national trend of introspection, according to Handorf. "We as a nation were doing that, we're grappling with this history, and we as a school, as a monastery, decided we need to look into our own history as well," Handorf said. McKnight does not need to look far. She thinks about the report, which came out when she was a freshman, almost every day at school, she said. It rises to mind. McKnight, though, focuses on feeling proud that her ancestors' hands built Georgetown Visitation. "Because, if you look at it, what's better, you being the only black girl in that classroom?" she asked. "Or there being no black..."
Raindrop, truck top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.